Good evening, everyone. It's so glad to see you all join our second webinar for the Climate Action Speaker Series here at the City of Tigard. I'm Emily Tritch. I'm the Assistant City Manager for the City of Tigard over in Infrastructure and Investment. I'm really pleased to be joined today by our speaker, Troy Gagliano, who's an energy industry expert with 20 years of experience in wind, solar power, utilities, business development, government affairs, and more recently, electric vehicles and microgrids. He's led the development of utility-scale renewable projects in Oregon and Washington and aided in enacting landmark energy legislation. We're really pleased to have him speak with us today about some of his work in partnerships with our city, other cities, and really a lot of the ways that PG is helping this region to make progress in climate action. I'd like to invite folks to provide any clarifying questions there in the chat, and we'll open it up for a broader Q&A here at the end. And without further ado, I'll hand it off to Troy. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Emily. Appreciate it. Hi, everybody, and glad to be here. I'll share a few things on renewables and electric vehicle programs specifically that PGE has. We have a lot going on there, lots to offer, both for you guys as a city, for you as a resident of Tigard, a whole range of things. So appreciate the opportunity, and it's also been great to be able to help and be a part of the advisory group for the climate planning that you guys are doing. A lot of your neighbor cities, as you know, are doing similar work, and so we're always happy to be a part of that. And I think as you'll see through some of these programs I'll talk about, there's a lot we're already doing per our legislators and per the regulators at the Utility Commission. So there's a lot of low-hanging fruit that the city could capture, and it should be easier for you, compared to some cities living in other residing in other parts of the state and other part of the country. So we're delighted to be a partner for you. So thank you. So with that, next slide, please. I think there was one before that one. Yeah, there we go. Just real quick. Like Emily had said, I've been in the business here about 20 years, 9 at PGE. Been on the policy side of things and also put some steel in the ground in terms of building projects. So kind of seen a lot of it. And again, I'm going to talk about renewables and electric vehicle programs, because for all things energy efficiency, that's run through the Energy Trust of Oregon. About 22 years ago now, ETO was set up to manage everything, kind of took that work from utilities to manage all efficiency. So if you're a resident with a question about, I think they even send out LED light bulbs, like a pack of 6 light bulbs from the ETO if you call or fill out the form or something. I've done that in the past. So everything from residential, LEDs up to industrial energy efficiency, Energy Trust of Oregon is a place to go for all of that stuff. Next slide, please. So some of these I wanted to share, and our website is actually really good with getting into the details of all these. So I didn't put live links because if you just kind of Google these terms, it'll all show up pretty easily. So to focus specifically on EVs, we've got a range of things for schools with electric school buses, for homes and beyond, commercial and industrial. One pretty neat one is a residential EV charging rebate. You can get $500 to $1,000 rebate for installing, a charger in your garage, for example. So that's a pretty good one. Outside of just residential, we have businesses who are interested in providing incentives for their employees, for their customers, right? If you're a building, multifamily building, you might want electric vehicle charging for your tenants. So we've got a business EV charging that can help there. The Drive Change Fund is a really cool one, and that one's just generally trying to help push the wider adoption of EVs, and that's not just cars or trucks, that's electric bikes. Even some park districts have been interested in electric, yard tools, blowers, trimmers, mowers, all that kind of stuff. So the Drive Change Fund kind of covers a larger umbrella of all things electric. The focus on that one is good too, because that's a focus on public and nonprofits and then environmental justice communities. So we're reaching out with programs that way. Fleet Partner is a good one, and that this is if you're a city and you've got several dozen or 100 or more vehicles and you want to help start to transfer that over or switch that fleet over to electric vehicles, PGE can help. It's a no-cost analysis some of our engineers and program managers can do, kind of to help you look at, all right, here are the number of vehicles, here's where City Hall is, or here's where Public Works is, and we think that would be a location. So we can kind of do the math for you, give you a nice simple report, again, at no charge, to figure out, all right, here's what you might want to do. Here's some estimates on upgrades that might be required. Here's maybe some costs you would see that you might need City Council to approve, or here's some work that PGE can cover. So Fleet Partner is a great one. And then I think a really cool one is the Electric School Bus Fund. This one's relatively new, like in the last 3 years, I want to say. But that one is where school districts, obviously, would apply, and they can get up to $500,000 per application, and that can go toward basically the delta. You got, I'm picking numbers, like 200 grand for a traditional bus, and maybe it's 300 grand for an electric bus. That additional 100,000 can go towards covering this. So up to $500,000. And that's not just the cost of the bus. Also, some money can go toward the infrastructure needed to power the bus. So the electric school bus one is pretty cool. I know Beaverton's won a couple. I'll keep an eye on this one. I think there's an announcement in September for the new round of winners, and there's some pretty cool results coming out of that. So when I hear it, I'll send it along to you too, Emily, for distribution. Did I see a question at the time here? A question so far?
There's a question in the chat from Kenny. Does the EV charger have to be hardwired? Is PGE considering using EV batteries for peak grid storage?
Yeah, the charger's got to be hardwired into your home, your circuit box. And then the second question, yes, we're definitely thinking of that. And this kind of gets into all things smart grid, which is a big term, means a lot of things, but what you point out is a good example. A smarter grid will eventually involve, say you got an EV, an electric truck in your garage at home, that's plugged into the grid, basically, right? You're going to be charging that thing. Well, not only us, but technology manufacturers and product developers are all making that such that the connection between that vehicle and us as the grid provider here, that gets smarter. It becomes a two-way system. Whereas you're not only just plugging in to power your vehicle in, let's go with the ice storm from a couple years ago, but I had 7 days of outage at my house in Milwaukee. And yeah, if I had a vehicle that I could power a portion of my house on, then we're really getting somewhere, right? So it's not just us, but that's PGE, technology manufacturers, whole bunch of people, you guys in cities, all of us coming together to partner to build that smarter grid so that we could do just things like that. Yes, the utility can call on your vehicle under normal situations. Your power's not out, but hey, we can call on hundreds and thousands of vehicles within our service territory and power from there instead of having to fire up one of the gas plants or use another power plant that's farther out. So yes, everything kind of smart grid is heading in that direction. And that'll be a really cool thing to see. Is there anything else at this time, or we can go to the next slide there?
All right.
Oh, I think maybe it was before EVs then. It was the renewables focus.
Yep.
There we go. Okay, cool. So these are several renewable energy focused programs. The good thing here is that some of these are really simple to sign up for. Some of them have been around a really long time, and then there's some newer ones. I'll just kind of go into them. Green Future Choice is, you might have seen it under Clean Wind. It had different names. This is the one, been around for a long time. Voluntary green power program. You as a customer at a home can call and say, hey, I'd like to offset 100% of my home's usage with this. It's basically a renewable energy credit-based program. And we can get you tightened up with that in a really short order. And it appears on your bill, a few dollars a month, you get X renewable energy credits for this amount. And those are traditionally from wind projects. Some solar, I think, is coming into that. And we try to keep it as close to home, but that's usually Oregon and Washington projects. That changes year to year based on the price of the renewable energy credits that we can find. We want to keep the price nice for everybody, but we try to keep that close to home. So that comes from projects that have been operating for a while. Similar to that is Green Future Enterprise. So not just residential, but this is for cities, counties, universities, right? Commercial and industrial customers. They can do a similar thing, say, I want to offset my usage by buying credits from that program. The cool thing on this one for Green Future Enterprise is, and again, happy to help you guys with the climate planning that you're doing. City of Tigard has never participated in this renewable energy credit program, which is cool because you talk about low-hanging fruit. This is a really neat program where if the city decides, wow, that's the first thing we could do relatively quickly for not a lot of expense, you can get your, basically offset X amount of usage with these renewable energy credits. Green Future Impact, the next one gets a little more direct, if you will. So this one where we had a bunch of different cities, counties, some businesses, a lot of them motivated by their own climate goals, basically said, we've been participating in that Green Future Enterprise a long time, that renewable energy credit-based system. But, do you have anything better than just me buying renewable energy credits from maybe a wind project that's been around for 10 years? Is there something newer, more fresh? And as a result of that, we created with our regulators and other partners, created Green Future Impact. So this is one where some cities, I'm just thinking of some, Washington County, City of Beaverton, Hillsborough, I think City of Milwaukee. There's a lot of folks were members of that and said, all right, we want to put our names on the line, and they sign up for a contract. Yeah, I think they had a 10 or a 15-year option, and the price was comparable to what they had been paying on the Green Future Enterprise at the time. So they locked into a contract, and the newer thing here is that money and those funds went to build a brand new 162 megawatt solar project that's in not Union County, Gillum County, Northeast Oregon. So that's more for your customer who wants, I want to see, but from my investment, that steel in the ground wouldn't be there, right? And that customers are kind of going in that direction. So if you want to start with Green Future Enterprise, really simple. Green Future Impact, we have one tranche going. We don't have kind of tranche 2 open yet, but there are plans to do that. But that's another thing, as you guys move forward with the climate plan into next year and city council approval, we can stay in touch about City of Tigard perhaps being a partner in the expansion of that project. Or I'm sorry, of that program. And then finally is the Renewable Development Fund, which is a really neat one. It's a lot of solar projects on buildings, some wind, in-pipe hydro. They put like a little turbine in the water pipes in the Hillsborough water system near the Gordon Faber, the park there where the Hillsborough Hops play. And that was a cool technology where this is eligible for renewable development funding. This project is funded from our voluntary renewable energy customers who participate in Green Future Enterprise. We had some extra money there and said, all right, let's go do this. And the direction was a focus on public, nonprofit, again, environmental justice, something with an education component. The cool thing is at Tigard, you see at the bottom of the slide there in 2019, the Red Rock Commons project, which is at the bottom left on the picture, that's some solar on the roof there. They applied, and PGE awarded them, or I should say that program awarded them $111,000 out of the total $157,000 cost for that 54 kilowatt solar array. That's an affordable housing, multi-tenant kind of a building. That kind of project is exactly what this program's created for. So it's awesome to see Tigard's got some of that. If you hear of anybody, developers or the city itself building any kind of, heck, I mean, like a new city hall, new public works building, all that stuff would be a great candidate to apply for. If you're going to put some solar on the roof of that building, let's talk about this program. We can connect you with the people who manage that any day of the year. They love to have conversations talking about this. The window for that usually opens in the spring of every year. Another neat one, it's on the top picture, is the Beaverton Public Safety Center. It's basically like a new police station where everything's upgraded. We put a microgrid in there, so some of the Renewable Development Fund money went to that. They have a battery for storage out back, and there's also an on-site generation. You tie all those three things together, and you have a microgrid. And this is the place where in a 9.0 emergency response, police, right? Everybody reports to this facility, and they can power some of this building if the grid happens to be down for a long time. So microgrid, more self-sufficient for an emergency operations building is pretty darn cool. I think that was everything. I didn't want to talk too much, but just wanted to share some ideas of let you see that we're doing a lot. So don't feel like you're starting from step one. And again, when it comes to the climate plan, depending on what City Council approves and wants to achieve, there's some low-hanging fruit that can get you there to clean up the city's energy pretty quickly, or some longer-term things. So we're doing a lot of work for you. So you're not in it alone, and you're not starting from step one. So happy to take any further questions about this or anything else energy-wise if anybody's got something.
Thank you so much, Troy. There's a lot of great things to highlight. I love the marriage of the mitigation and the adaptation pieces, which I know our Tigard City Council is interested in, how we can be both energy conscious, efficient, and adaptive for a major hazard event or something to that effect. I'd love to open it up for questions. If you raise your hand, I will happily unmute you, and you can choose about sharing your camera or not.
I have a question, Troy. Can you tell us how you're coming along in cleaning up the grid and getting the whole grid off of dirty fuel?
Excellent question. Yes, thanks for bringing that one up. There was a House Bill 2021 from last year's legislative session, which basically lays out the decarbonization goals for PGE, as well as Pacific Power, some other utilities in the state. But those decarb goals are basically, we have to be 80% decarbonized on the energy we deliver to you by 2030. And that's 100% decarbonized by 2040. So kind of for perspective, give or take how the hydro system is doing, what the water levels are, how the wind's going, we're at about 35 to 40% these days of non-carbon resources in our energy mix, okay? So going from that to 80% in like 7.5 years. It's kind of quick. But that's the goal that's out there. More than a goal, actually. I mean, that's state legislation. Washington has a very similar goal. So, again, we're not alone in that. So that's the bogey that's out there. And again, I think that's a great thing for folks like you at the city who are doing the climate planning. If you want to get to 100% by some year, your utilities are already taking a big chunk of that for you. Right. So if you wanted to say, hey, well, we want to get to 100% by 2035, not 2040, then you can still take, we still all work together to get you credit for that initial chunk. And then if you want another 20%, like 5 years before 2040, you could do that with one of those programs I presented before. Does that help?
Yeah. Can you say a little more about how you're going to close that gap?
Well,
how are you going to get there?
Yeah, we've been doing a whole lot of work here since the year started. Again, the House bill from last year was not very long ago. So we've been cracking pretty hard on figuring out that very question. So 2030, we're looking at what energy resources, there's a whole stack of resources you could use, right? Non-carbon things, geothermal, wind, more solar. So that's the generation. And then you look at the storage technologies, lithium-ion batteries, flow batteries are maybe an option, and that all those technologies are evolving pretty quickly. So we're looking at the right combination of those things to piece together to meet 2030. And a lot of the projects where we've got some wind and solar coming in, there's some room for expansion at some of those. We're going to have another RFP go out in 2023 and 2025, basically looking out into the market to all the renewable developers saying, all right, here's our need for these next couple of years. What do you have? And just like, it's historical process, they respond, we get a short list, there's some winners, and, we go and we build more. One thing that's a challenge for not just us as a utility, not just Oregon, who's trying to do this, but any state, and there are a lot now, that have these kind of decarb goals. And even if you don't, if you just want to add more transmission, or heck, if you want to just add, if you're a coal heavy state and you want to add more coal, not many are doing that, but if you did, everyone is going to need more transmission lines. It's kind of like roads. We, as a nation, we've invested in somewhat in our infrastructure, but there are lots of places where we haven't poured a lot into infrastructure for decades now, right? And in some areas, the power transmission grid is like that. It's great in that in the last 10 years, the amount of renewable energy that's on our system has grown tremendously. And when I was building wind and solar projects, I don't know that I could imagine we'd have so much so soon. So that's been awesome. But the challenge is the capacity that was out there on that transmission system is used up now, right? So the next, whatever $100 million question or $64 million question is going to be, where do the transmission lines go and how do we get them all in, right? So just at society wide, we're going to have to think about that. It's the main speed bump for that. I see Gary's got a hand up, man.
Hi, Troy.
Oh yeah.
You, yeah, with that last comment about the cost of transmission, puts a premium on distributed renewable energy generation. I'm wondering how that factors into your program. Do you encourage it, or are you favoring selling the programs that you mentioned earlier?
Yeah, we need all that. Yeah, and that's a good point you make about not just generation, because the things I was talking about are, wind and solar projects, several counties, couple hundred miles away, right? Central Oregon, Northeast Oregon, Southeastern Washington. We got a project there that comes into us. That's the big stuff out there that comes in on transmission lines. Now, in order to obviate some of that problem is exactly that. And we're all about trying to we've got a plan actually to get about 500 megawatts of power generation on the distribution side. So the transmission lines go from here to a couple hundred miles away, right? Your distribution lines come from the substations that are in your neighborhoods and kind of go down your street or under the sidewalk into your home. That's the lower voltage distribution level. And yeah, there's again, society wide, we're going to need to put a lot more generation out there close to like on people's homes and businesses, close to where we all consume it, right? Because then you got less transmission losses, and it's just greater to have the green energy produced right closer to where it's going to be consumed. Yeah. So we're all about that. And that's going to be a combination of things that people have been doing a long time, like solar panels on your roof for business, but you couple that with a battery, like at the Beaverton Public Safety Center there, and then you can store that, and the generation and the storage work together. And at nighttime, when there's less demand and power tends to be cheaper, right? We can move to time of use rates. And if it's cheaper at night, then you program that smart grid I mentioned earlier to say, all right, well, I'm going to wait until maybe 10 o'clock at night when there's less demand and power prices go down. Then it's going to be maybe cheaper to charge my EV. Maybe it's cheaper to charge my battery at home during those times. So that's another example of how you take traditional big projects, still clean energy, but big stuff out there on the transmission system, coupled with smaller projects on the distribution system near our homes and businesses. All that's got to work together and get smarter. But that's a really good question about using systems on the distribution side.
I have a question. I know that the city of Tigard has been involved in, I believe it's the drive change effort and getting some EV infrastructure installed down at our public works facility. I'm looking forward to having an electrified fleet here at the city of Tigard to take advantage of that improvement. We have our first electric van online,
awesome.
So we're also making that the charging facility available for the public as well. I'm not sure if you know the details of that specific project, but do you have a sense of when we can celebrate the opening and the function of our local charging station at our public works facility?
I don't, but I know who the program manager is. So I can check with them tomorrow, Emily, and check the status on that. How's that work for you?
That sounds great.
For sure. I might have a question. I mean, I see a lot of city folks here. It'd be interesting maybe just to hear, what's the scuttle you're hearing around town? I mean, from not just city councilors, because you kind of know what they're thinking. They have to tell you what they're thinking to move toward a climate plan. But what are you guys hearing from, citizens or citizen groups or even, department heads within the city, that kind of thing? about just kind of all things climate plan, or how, what should the city focus on, because it's a long list of things in a climate plan, right? Anything that way would be insightful.
Yeah, Gary, go ahead.
That's Ken. Ken raised his hand.
Oh, Ken, please. You should be able to unmute. Let me double check.
That was untimely. I think he just left a note in the chat that he had to leave.
Oh.
It's Kenny. I'm trying to put two and two together here.
Well, Ken, if you're able to unmute, feel free to jump right in. Otherwise, Gary, maybe you can ask your question first, or your comment.
Gary's hand from before. I see a Rick now with a hand.
Gary, last call. Otherwise, we can come back to you. All right, Rick, go ahead.
Well, hello, Troy. I'm Rick Gruen. I manage our parks and natural areas in the city. And, we hear a lot about, why aren't we doing more with, electric or battery operated blowers and mowers? And, your, drive change fund obviously is something to look at. Our fleet manager already has some electric vehicles on order for us for some of the crew, the Lightning F-150. So we're excited to see that.
Nice.
So I guess my question to you, your experience, we've been hesitant about, getting right now electric blowers, edgers, and so forth, just from the, utility purpose, the efficiency, and so we're kind of looking and trying to find that sweet spot of, we have no issue about using, EV equipment, but we're trying to either wait for or find that sweet spot of power and performance and efficiency versus the balance of, yes, we can use those, and we do have some that we use for light duty.
Okay.
But if we're in the fall and it's leaves are falling and they're wet and they're heavy, and we're trying to keep the trails clean for safety. What's your sense on the technology coming for the utility equipment, for blowing, mowing, edging? And then we had a question came up about whether Vector trucks are available, that or street sweeper trucks. That again, how do we look at the technology, the power, the performance, and so that's kind of what we're hearing around the city. Why aren't you out there buying that? And
nice. That's insightful. Yeah, thanks for sharing that. That all makes sense. I can do this with you, Rick, if it's fine. I don't have the answer to that myself, so I'm not going to make something up on you. But I know the people who do have the answer. So if it works for you, how about maybe Emily, I can write you, or if you just want to write and loop in Rick and me, and then I can connect you to the right folks over here, Rick, to put you on those questions, because we do have folks who look at that, and because we've had that for years of, yeah, I hear you on, these kind of Nissan Leafs, but I need some F-150s, and it's awesome that those things are coming. I'm glad to hear you guys got a line on that. So we do have folks that track the evolution of those technologies. So I'm happy to connect you that way if that'll help.
Yeah, that'd be great, Troy. And Emily, I
Okay.
don't know if you talked to Brian recently, Brian Rager, about the issues with the street sweeper trucks, the contract, and whether we should be looking at doing that in-house. And again, the question came up is, are there electric vehicle street sweeper? So Troy, one of the pieces of equipment, two big pieces of equipment that we'd be interested in learning more about would be street sweepers and Vector trucks. and what kind of capability is offered technology wise,
Yeah.
as opposed to a gas or diesel powered
Yeah.
rig.
So did you say a tractor truck, as in like tractor trailers?
Vector as in sucking all that goo out of the pipes.
Oh, okay. Gotcha.
Our Sandy Storm crew, they get the fun, dirty job of
Yeah,
sucking all the yuck out of the system.
gotcha. Yeah. I'll, or Emily, if you don't mind, just maybe connect the two of us and I can get you on that one in the morning.
No problem. And
Thank you, Rick. Thanks for sharing that. That's good to know.
Yeah, thank you. Great presentation. Thanks, Troy.
Thank you. Yeah.
Ken, I see your camera's on, and feel free to jump right in.
Great. Thank you. So it took me a while to figure out how to do this. Quick question, and I'm on Emily's task force. And I have slightly a different viewpoint, hoping you can help me. Is I'm really focused on trying to get individuals to step up and start taking climate action. I know your presentation was great and a lot more on the city, but my perspective, I'm going to try to convince Emily that this might be a way you want to go, is if we can get a lot of the people to also take the initiative, that will help the city continue taking that initiative. And that's why I really applaud these presentations. What are your recommendations for an individual that we can do to help reduce our climate footprint that can then be multiplied by all the people that are doing it? Thank you.
Yeah, that's a good one. Well, it's a lot. And I'm excited to see what your consultant actually says about all that, because it's a lot of things, right? I mean, it's sort of like smart city. There's a lot of things on that list that, what's a smart city? You can think of a dozen different technologies or widgets that make that smarter. And yeah, when you talk about individuals or collectively as a community becoming more green, you got sustainability, right? You've got maybe recycling, you've got food refuse, you got bee pollination gardens, all these things. That's not my area of expertise, but I've helped some other cities with these similar things. Hillsborough, for example, has been doing this for a long time, and they're looking at all of that. You're probably familiar with the program or their efforts. They've got that whole list of things. The thing that comes to mind for me that's relatively simple is the voluntary green power program. Right. That's the one where, and you probably even still get a bill insert if you get, hard copy bills or even paperless billing from PGE. We still send out notifications that programs available. The cool thing on that, I forgot to mention, it's going on like 15 years now as the #1 voluntary renewable green power program in the country. And that's because of our customers, right? I mean, we're doing it because of our customers, but all the customers out there get the credit for that. So that program's easy, it's effective, and you can even do it in chunks. If you say, all right, I consume X amount of electricity, 1,000 kilowatts a month, I only want to buy like a block of 250 kilowatts. You can buy blocks, right? So you can do a percentage and manage it that way. It's still cheap. I mean, if we're talking single-digit dollars added to a bill. I get it at my house, and it's affordable. So, I mean, that's simple. It's easy. People can sign up online, or you can call and they can get you set up in really short order. And that's one thing, just as an individual homeowner, right? You're offsetting your consumption with helping more green energy, again, mostly wind and solar coming from those, being out there in our region and, in our world. So that's the thing that comes to mind for like really low-hanging fruit and easy for individuals to get behind.
Let me add to that if I can, if no one else in line. What about smart meters? I am trying to talk to my people and say it's important to turn off the lights if you're not using them. It's important to do the dishwasher at midnight versus 2 o'clock in the afternoon. And I think a smart meter would help us identify when to use these appliances and when not to. Also would give us an idea of why should I care about turning off my lights if I'm not using it? How does that help me? How do I see that? Are smart meters coming in our future? And if so, when can I expect to see it?
Yeah, PGE, we switched out all of the meters in our service territory, like 800,000 of them, neighborhood of 10 years ago. And so what that means is we get a lot more wireless communications from them. So it helps with our billing. We have a lot less physical meter readers, right? Like in days of old that you'd see people out there with the fast meter reader coming up to your house. We've been able to get rid of a lot of that. That leads to cost savings for customers if we're not paying to do that kind of work. So it's smarter in that we can communicate better about our billing, right? And being more accurate about how much energy customers use, and then our billing on that.
But how can I
Yeah.
interpret that, or how can I use that by individually showing that
Yeah.
if I turn off a light, it's going to reduce my electrical bill?
That's the next step, like in the evolution of the smart city. Okay. And not to be like too futuristic or too Star Trek here, because it's not that far off, but it's a combination of things that have to happen for what you're thinking, and things are going in that direction. So you need the smart meter, which we got. That's probably check that box for now.
So the smart meters are PGE. I don't have one at my house, or do I?
Yeah, all the meters have been switched out to these smarter ones that at least communicate better. Now, I don't know if they're how they're going to handle widgets, that people are thinking about now, but you're going to need the utility in there. You're going to need you as the customer, and then you're also going to need smarter appliances, right? Like pretty much any appliance you can buy now has the Energy Star label on it, little blue square, right? That's great because, I remember when I got into the business here 15, 20 years ago, you still had a lot of non-Energy Star compliant, non-efficient appliances out there. So now pretty much everything's Energy Star. I think the next round is all of those things become smart. You've got a chip in your refrigerator, which is like your largest appliance energy consumer in your house. So your washer, your dishwasher, your clothes, your EV charger, when that comes, all those things are going to have chips, and they're going to have to be centrally connected to communicate to do all those things. Read from the grid, right? So the utility can in the future supply information and say, all right, here's where power prices are here, and then come 10 o'clock maybe or midnight, boom, power prices are here. So you'll be able to see, even like on a smart thermostat, oh, here's what my kilowatt hour rate is right now. Let me program all of my appliances to do their thing later at night, like say 2 a.m. or something like that. So things are definitely heading in that direction.
Do you have a time frame?
Oh gosh, I don't know. That's a crystal ball question. I'm not General Electric, and I'm all the appliance manufacturers that are out there. But I can tell you this. I mean, from somebody who's been in this industry long enough. Even like 5 years ago, 5 to 8 years ago, this stuff was still kind of a pipe dream, and now you've got Panasonic, you've got all kinds of people, coalescing around gathering all this stuff to make it so. Because it's things on communications devices, it's internet supply and a good fast internet connection, right? So it's a lot of different things that have to come together, but the world's heading in that direction, that's for sure.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ken. And Dave, please. If you're talking, you're on mute.
There we
okay.
go.
Okay.
Took me a moment to figure it out there. Troy, you asked, what's going on in the community? What are people talking about? I just want to share two things. So I'm Tigard's transportation planner, and so I've got transportation on my mind, and of course electrification. So two things. Number one, we did apply for a PGE drive change grant this round to fund some e-bike libraries at affordable housing locations in Tigard, and we're actually interviewing with one of the grant administrators tomorrow.
Awesome.
On that proposal. So we're pretty excited about that. And then the other thing I want to share is that we have a project that we just selected a consultant for that will be starting up this fall, and that's for the Tigard electric mobility strategy. And you actually wrote a letter of support for that grant, that project a while back. So we're really excited to finally be starting on that. And for the electric mobility strategy, one of the things that we're thinking about a lot, and because there's so much talk about electrification of vehicles, it's a big deal. It's really important, obviously, to get the ICE vehicles off the road to reduce the GHG emissions. Sorry about that. I've got my daughters out here outside with me. So in terms of vehicle electrification, though, one of the key points of this electric mobility strategy we want to focus in on is the equity piece, and really making sure that transportation electrification doesn't leave people behind. you know, even with federal state subsidies for electric vehicles, the average transaction price of a new EV right now is around $60,000, and of course that's going down. They'll become cheaper in the coming years, and the subsidies help, but it's still a huge barrier for a lot of people in the community to go out and buy a new vehicle these days. The electric mobility strategy is really going to focus in on how can we equitably transition to electric transportation future. So we're thinking about micromobility, we're thinking about transit, those sorts of things. So I just want to share that with you and leave it at that. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I'm glad to hear that's taken off. I remember connecting you and Lloyd Purdy there to Luke on our side about that study. So I'm glad to hear that's moving along. Yeah, you're right. That's a good point about the equity aspect, because, you know, if you look at multi-tenant buildings, right? Lots of folks, not everybody obviously owns their own single family home, but how do you, if you live in a complex, well, you don't have a garage, right? So what are you going to do? Well, so one thing we're looking at, we do have the program that looks at helping multifamily residential buildings. But another thing we're looking at is, and this basically makes charging infrastructure easier to find for everybody. And it would essentially be using the right of way in the city to kind of, I'm simplifying it, but think about, you know, you got PGE poles in the city. And if you could have some number of those along strategically chosen areas based on usage or driving patterns, you could basically have an EV charger connected to that pole, right? So people could just kind of park in those areas and boom, there's the nozzle, if you will, right? And just kind of charge it and plug it in and charge the vehicle with on-street parking essentially. So we're thinking in the same direction on that stuff too. Thanks, Dave.
That's great. Thanks. Gary, did you have another question or comment?